we sell consulting services. B, we're energy storage, so we only work on energy storage. And C, we're one-stop shop, which means we're both a market analyst and a technical consultant with, I guess, the peculiarity to have the same team that works on both of those aspects of the industry, and therefore being able to be probably one of the deepest in terms of how far we can go. So today I'm going to present to you our quarterly leaderboard, which you know, every quarter, and we started this off you know, just at the beginning of the quarantine with social media, as a matter of fact, where we're sharing with you information about two categories of key information. First, about a leaderboard of players in terms of which are the key players globally for energy storage, and B, in terms of countries, meaning in which countries should you focus your attention as an energy storage player, be it an investor or a market participant. Okay, so by the way, the way I usually present this is I talk about the top players in the top countries. This time I'm not going to talk about the top countries because, you know, that doesn't change so often, but I'm going to talk about something which is much more interesting, which is what I call the new countries, meaning which are the new energy storage hotspots that are emerging and how are the current energy storage hotspots changing and adapting to cater to more storage looking forward. All right, so firstly, I just want to say, I'm just going to make I'm going to make two shameless prop for our services during this presentation. So I apologize for this. This is the first prop. It lasts about 1 minute, and I get another one, which is, I believe, in the end, which lasts about 20 seconds. So bear with me. I'm sorry. This is the price you have to pay, I guess. But it also serves a purpose. It's not just a shameless plug for our services. Really, the first thing I'm telling you is when I do an energy storage leaderboard, I'm going to base that on market information, which we patiently and very systematically gather about every single project, megawatt level storage project in the world. And that's made in a database that we happen to sell. So I invite you, of course, to go and subscribe, which is called CHESS. That stands for Clean Horizon Energy Storage Source. And so, cutting a long story short, that database, as of today, features approximately 1,400 megawatt level storage projects globally, which we can independently verify insofar as we have information about those projects that is not confidential, meaning it's either online or it was discussed at a conference like this one where information is meant to be shared. Therefore, and I'm assuming if some of you are in that space, or maybe some of you are the vendors that are represented in this database, you may find that, oh my God, they don't have all of our data, which is a feedback we get all the time. But the reason we don't have all of your data is because we will not take any data that we cannot verify independently outside of without breaching any NDA. So anybody that claims that they have 2 gigawatt reference with an unknown and confidential Asian country, I'm sorry, we just don't count this in our database. So we verify each of those projects one by one. And our database, the way we amass the data is, to be quite frank, so rational and so systematic that this database, and we'll make a press conference about 2 months from now, is actually the only, or the first and only database that is used by an index, which is, I forgot the name of this index, but it's a stock listed index, which is tracking the performance of listed energy storage companies. And a few funds, or actually some funds, a few of them, are actually building tracker funds following this index. So this database that I'm going to showcase here is an entry, one of the data that is used by the only index, stock listed index in the world that has a specific focus on energy storage. So there's a bit of a process behind this. So, all right, okay, so before I get, that was the end of the plug. It was pretty shameless, but I hopefully it provided you a bit of context for where this information comes from. So first thing I want to say is this is a chart I've been showing at every show I've been to, physical or virtual, for the past, I don't know, 3 years, and we update it all along. This is just to say this keeps on confirming what I've been saying we've been saying at a company for a couple of years now. This shows, those numbers there shows at the end of each calendar year how many megawatts of energy storage projects have been announced. So announced is different from a project that we consider announced is a project where we understand that a player, be it an investor or an integrator, is confident enough that they will build that project, that they announce this project is expected to be built. So not all of the announced end up being built, but it's a very good it's a very good indicator of what the future holds. Because if a project is announced in 2019, it probably is going to be marketed, or there's probably going to be a transaction, financial transaction, say in 2020, and a COD in 2021, for example. So what we keep on seeing in this graph is that the exponential has started, meaning if you look at the end of each calendar year, how many megawatts of projects have been announced, that number increased with a, I don't know, maybe 20, has been increasing with a 25 or 30% CAGR. And we are in September. This number is from last week, so it's as as fresh as we can we can do it. As you see, we are 2/3 more or less into 2020, and as you know, 2020 has been a very spectacular year. But I'm not even sure the coronavirus will slow that exponential. So we'll see at the end of the year. But voilà, that trend is started, and doesn't seem that coronavirus is going to have so much of an impact on it. And I think it's something we've all witnessed in our activity. Yes, maybe things have slowed down for a couple of months, but they've picked up quite fast. Another way to look at this data is to look at this data and to look at how promising the field is. If you just when we track every single one of this 1,400 projects that I mentioned, we look at their status in terms of whether they're operational or under construction. So they're soon going to be operational, either under construction, or if they are announced, as I've defined earlier. And as you see, most of the industry, most of the projects there are still announced, meaning, you know, most of the largest chunk of this industry is still to come, in a way that's credible according to us. So, you know, we believe that most of that red bar is going to end up being built. So really, we are working in an industry that's marked by growth. It's just another way to see it. All right, so that was for the overall number, just to you know, rub our own shoulder, and what do you call this? To give ourselves a nice tap in the back, or whatever the expression is in this odd language that English is. But anyways, I think we're all happy to be in a sector that's growing. We understand that not all sectors are like that in this day and age. Absolutely not. Now, if we just talk about players, you know, in terms of the energy storage value chain, which I'm not going to get into right now during this discussion, but simply put, the idea is you very often, not always, but you very often have a so-called system integrator, also called an EPC, turnkey provider, which is essentially an entity that puts together the whole storage systems with the inverter, and probably with some kind of EPC and construction and electrical engineering with it, and provides the complete suite of service to an investor, usually a developer or an IPP. So what I'm going to show now is just the leaderboard for system integrators, and later in a couple of slides, I'll show similar data, but now not for system integrators, but for project developers, IPPs. Okay, so there's plenty of ways to show this. I cut it short a little bit because I wanted to keep some room for the second part of the discussion. If you have any question on this, I encourage you to call us or to ask questions now. But simply put, we like to represent. There's many ways you can represent the information. We like presenting it this way for a couple of reasons. First of all, as you can see, you know, we only look here at the projects that are installed or operational in this slide. So if you compare, you can see in terms of on the vertical axis the megawatt rating of those projects, and in the x-axis the megawatt hour rating of those projects. And for each player, the size of the circle there that represents it tells you the number of projects. So you know, you can have one project which is 100 megawatts, or you can have 10 projects which are 10 megawatts, which does not tell you the same about how each player manages their business, right? So the size of the circle there is of importance. And the color of the circle also tells you in which country those projects are deployed. So the darker, the more the larger the geographic footprint of the player is. So the first thing you see, and also we draw that nice 1 hour line here, that dashed line here is if you're above this, your system is less than an hour. If you're below this, your system is lower than an hour. So it's long, has longer duration than an hour, I'm sorry. So the first thing first is, yes, a lot of companies are probably grouped around the 1 hour reference, but that tends to be old world. We all know that the 1 hour systems or less are geared toward frequency regulation, and that frequency regulation is usually a locative opportunity, but it's a very shallow one. And so this was the opportunity that was initially filled in by market participants. As opposed to what we're seeing now in countries like the UK, the US, or now slowly across Europe, and even to some extent in Australia, we're seeing that we're moving towards longer duration projects, 2, 3, 4 hours, sometimes in some cases even 5 hours, like in Hawaii. And so the leaders in that space have been Fluence and Tesla. Well, as you may know, NEC Energy Solutions is no longer into the business of storage. Their parent company announced, I think it was a couple of months ago, that they would discontinue their activity as a system integrator. But you know, for the sake of, I would say, knowing who built the project, it's still those guys. But you can see it from this very slide that indeed this company was having problem. Why? Because even though it had a lot of references, you see their references are more or less around an hour, meaning these were older references, and it's probably a company that didn't manage to, I would say, move with the industry. I can go on forever on this, but I would like you to keep this chart in mind. We update it every quarter, so you can make yourself a nice time lapse of those after a year or two. But we'll be happy to discuss it with you. Now, I'll be doing the same with developers and IPPs. I use the word project developers, but I'm voluntarily confusing it here with an independent power producer, or pretty much anybody who is the one investing into the storage space. So now, as opposed to the previous slide where I was talking about projects that were operational, right now I'll present it only here. I would only present the references of projects that are announced. Why? For many reasons, but whereas the operational projects tell me where the industry, where the field is now, but that actually tells me where the industry was, where the market was a year or two ago when those projects were obtained, as opposed to the announced projects, which I'm using now as a source for this slide, tells me where the market is going. So same as before, I'm going to show you a nice graph with multiple circles, but I just want to give you that very simple ranking there, which is made, as you can see, in terms of megawatts of storage projects for all of those players. And this is the top 20. And you'll see here, you'll find a lot of US companies. You'll find a French company, which is Neoen, and a couple international players. The other way to look at this, this doesn't really tell you how different those player is. You just see a list of names that you may or may not be familiar with. We like to represent it this way. As you can see, we change here the X and Y axis. So the vertical axis tells you how many projects those developers have, and the horizontal axis tells you in how many countries do they actually have a non-confidential project that is being announced. And we believe those, whereas the size of the circle there tells you how many megawatts, so it goes back to the previous slide. We prefer to view the players in this way because it tells you that those IPPs are very different beast from system integrators, as so far as they tend to be very local. As you see, a lot of them actually operate in just one country. This is the case of a lot of the players active in the US, or until recently in Korea, as opposed to really working with companies that are operating in multiple countries. IPPs operating in multiple countries tend to be rare. Please keep in mind that those numbers are only applied to non-confidential projects. So really, the cutoff is not so much between AES and all the other ones. It's really between 1 and 2. If an IPP is operating in 2 countries, it probably means it's looking at operating in 3, 4, or 10. So really, the difference here is between the national operators and the international operators. Okay, so right, this was for the players, and I'm happy to take in any question later on. Right now, I'd like to tell you, to give you a restaurant menu in the next 10 minutes or so that we have, about what has been, which countries have we been seeing emerge lately, and which are the ones that you should pay attention to as a professional seeking to, yeah, make money in the storage space. So the good thing is this is just lunchtime or after lunchtime, so we only have 31 attendees. This is excellent, because out of the 31 attendees, it means that all of your competitors, they do completely suck, because they're going to miss this part where we're telling them in 10 minutes where to go and how to make money. So you should greet yourself. What you've been doing is fantastic. So the first thing, I'm going to start with 2 boring slides. This is super boring, but it's super important. So bear with me. First thing, I'm going to talk about Europe. It says Europe 1/2 because something's coming up. There's another slide there. That's 2 slides, right? So bottom line is, anybody there who, the 31 of you should know that if you're going to be doing energy storage business in continental Europe, which by the way you should, and on which we'd be very we would very gladly help you, the one thing you should know is the days of putting a storage asset and just banking on one market are long gone. And oh, by the way, similarly, and except for various small exceptions, there are some exceptions, which I'm going to discuss in a couple of minutes, but there's no such thing in Europe as, there's no such thing as a PPA where you can put your storage and get a fixed payment and a 12% IRR with a very bankable contract with a national utility, which you could do the investment and forget about it. Those things don't exist, with some exceptions. So what you have to keep in mind is you're gonna go into those into the European markets for storage. This is great. Welcome, congratulations. What's gonna happen is you're gonna need to be very clever. You're gonna need to live with a lot of flexibility in how this system is going to be marketed on the various energy markets, and you're gonna have to feel comfortable with the fact that yes, if you invest, develop the project today, invest next year, and have a COD at the end of next year, you don't know, there's no way for you to know reliably what will be the revenue streams 7 years from now, 6 years from now, 10 years from now. But you have to be comfortable with the fact that the regulations are changing, but they're changing in a way that tends to favor flexibility. And as storage is the most flexible energy asset, then it tends to work in your favor. But that means this investment bears a regulatory risk, which is a positive risk, but still a risk. Let's call it uncertainty. So first thing first, there's a new revenue stream that's emerging in Europe, which is called the aFRR, for Automated Frequency Restoration Reserve, formerly known as Secondary Reserve. Long story short, this is an ancillary service that has a capacity and an energy component. The capacity component is going to remain decided at the national level as it is today. The energy component is being harmonized between all of the European countries. And the way this harmonization is done is actually extremely favorable to storage. I won't get into the detail, but for example, the full activation time will be 7.5 minutes. The bids will be 50 minutes long. Anybody, and the granularity is not so big, so anybody who has studied this kind of market knows that 15-minute bids are lovely for us. In terms of, my second slide on Europe, in terms of when and where those regulations, this new revenue is happening, voila, we stole this from some regulator whose name I forgot, but there's a link down there. But essentially, it starts in France next year, and is that Austria? Yes, probably. And then it's followed up by all those countries in green, and then later in 2023, 2024, the Nordics, Iberia, parts of Germany, Poland will follow suit. So congratulations, your energy storage project in Europe just got even more complex, but however, probably much more lucrative. Second point, maybe some of you, I don't know, oh, there's a 30, I don't know who's the attendee here, but maybe some of you have been involved into the Portuguese tender. There has been tender for PV plus storage in Portugal, whose result was announced last month, whatnot. Long story short, those players there that are announced shown on this slide got a 15-year PPA with pretty much the system operator in Portugal, I guess. And the red ones there, the number there in white is the amount of PV they get, and the total amount of storage is probably 100 and 100 megawatt hour of storage. Basically, those winners there in red got the PPA, and the condition for them to get the PPA was to collocate storage with their PV. Congratulations to all of them. Still, Portugal is now officially on the map of storage, which you may not care about because it's a small country. By the way, you should. It's also a beautiful country, but you should actually care about because Portugal is super well integrated in the Spanish market. Spain is heavily looking, from the Spanish government is very specifically looking for inspiration in terms of how to deploy storage in their country, bearing in mind that A, regulations in Spain today make it impossible to make money with storage, and B, the Spanish government has set itself the first ever European target for battery storage by 2030, which in their case is 2.5 gigawatts. So they have a target. They need to change the way they procure storage. Their neighbor just did something. Will it be repeated to Spain? Don't know, not sure, but hell of an important, I would say, factor there. Next thing, if we're keeping with the nice and sunny and pleasant countries, well, Italy. Italy, you may not have heard about it, but this country started off super early in storage back in 2012, then completely stopped, more or less completely stopped for 7.5 years. Now is the time to restart. By the end of this year, there's a 230 megawatt auction organized by the system operator, whereby the system operator is trying to secure so-called dynamic reserve, which for those of you that are familiar with the UK or with Great Britain is more or less an equivalent to aFRR. So basically, the difficulty there will be to first get into the tender, get your capacity secured. On top of it, there's a capacity market in Italy, and on top of it, this program there will only require the battery to be solicited, I think, about 1,000 hours per year. So meaning the rest of the year you're going to have to be doing arbitrage on the various energy markets for your system. So yes, it's probably very much probably the time to get interested in Italy. China. I apologize for this slide. This slide has a lot of colors, a lot of content, but I try to make it look a little bit organized. I will probably perish in the hell of consultants for having made a slide with 2 ideas. As you know, us consultants only make 1 idea per slide, but this one has 2 because it's China and it's complex. Simply put, yes, China has a domestic market for storage, which is opening up. Well, it's opening up. So as open as open as it can be in China, I guess. But the bottom line is, in one of the provinces, there's 2 provinces that we studied recently. The one that I'm showcasing here, Qinghai, it's a province with a lot of renewables. So basically, first idea on this slide on top of it is China has their own definition for ancillary service. One of their ancillary service, which I think they call, I forgot how they call it, they call the peak regulation service. Basically, in order to incentivize coal plants not to produce too much energy, if they have when their load factor is below 50%, they get paid for the energy they don't produce through a specific service product in their ancillary service market, and that specific product is called a downward peak regulation service. Okay, who cares? Well, we care because storage is actually eligible for this downward peak regulation service. In a way, and the way this works, more or less, is that the battery gets paid for charging through the service, and then gets paid for discharging on the energy market. And so, well, okay, fine. So you may not care, but Qinghai opened up its ancillary service with a specific mention of storage. That was last June. We don't know because it's not transparent. Even though we had somebody from China study this for many months, we don't know what are the prices on this market. But what we know is that a year before there has been a trial in this very province for essentially combining one storage with a couple PV farms, and we know what was the remuneration for that for the storage during that 1 year trial, and that remuneration was 142 euros per megawatt hour shifted. And by the way, that energy shift was made through the same scheme that I mentioned earlier in my first point in this graph. So you take that, you look at the capex, look at the opex, make some assumptions, and what you get up to, what you achieve is a 13% IRR before financing. So you know what? If you have some partners in China, you may want to give them a call. Another, and I believe that's the second to last country I'm going to discuss. I will discuss Israel. So, you know, usually when they discuss Israel, it's about, you know, something specific with the missiles, war, rockets, peace with the Arab countries, whatnot. Well, actually, let's just talk about storage. What Israel, we had been tracking Israel for many years as a potential hotspot for storage, and boom, that was it. July 15th this year, finally, the government announced the result of PV plus storage tender. The details of which I'm happy to discuss when you ask questions. But essentially, we're talking about 672 megawatt hour of storage that was recently permitted, which was selected, if you wish, by the government. And those three developers there were the winners. And essentially, what they have is as a PPA with the nationally owned utility. So on top of it, it's very bankable. The good news is, I'm assuming those players are still looking for suppliers. So if you have stuff to supply, maybe you should wake up. And the other good news is there's another tender coming up with very similar scheme, and probably in the next few months, not sure. So Israel suddenly made itself a name in the storage space as a market to keep an eye on. Now, last, I promised it, and here it is. Here's my last shameless plug. This is for this afternoon. We are having a training co-hosted by our beloved friends at Solar Media about specifically information about 3 points. First one, USA. Why you should care about the USA? You should care about the USA because with 10 gigawatt of announced projects, it is still, and as it has been for the past 10 years, it is still the hottest market for storage globally. So you should get the basics. We're delivering those this afternoon. We'll also be talking about the UK, which is the biggest market in Europe, if you count the UK as being part of Europe, obviously. And the third thing we'll discuss, I would say, technical and business specifics of co-location, which are relevant actually in the US and sometimes not so relevant in other geographies. So stay tuned, and we'll be happy to have you at our training this afternoon. I shamelessly put a link there that you can click to register. It is not free, but it's, come on, not so expensive. Anyways, that was it. This is me, I'm Michael Salomon. This is my email. This is my cell phone number. Obviously, you're welcome to call the office, but as you all know, just call the cell phone because you have a much better chance to get me there. And I'm done. Yeah, you promised me, I promised you 30 minutes, Lucy. I am done. It's 12:30 French time, so I'm gonna congratulate myself. I'm gonna give myself an A++++, just like Trump gave himself on the coronavirus handling. Done.
Yeah, pretty well done, Michael. We are certainly coming up against time, but I do realize that I took up a few minutes at the beginning doing my intro. So yeah, we'll definitely. So I've just started the polls. So we had a poll up, which has just gone live. I'm just waiting for the results to come in terms of, so from the audience's perspective, in which country would they like to deploy storage? So I'm just going to wait a few more moments for the results to come in. But at the moment, we've got a whopping 38% saying other. So the options are UK, Ireland, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Israel, the USA, Chile, and then other. So I don't know if you have any have any thoughts on what the other could be.
I don't know. Can they put in the chat box what they call other?
If anyone would like to let us know either on the portal and we'll be able to see, or in the Zoom chat, then we'd be very interested to know which other countries, the 36%.
By the way, there's a question here from Mr. or Mrs. Jarkawi asking on slide 16, which I just put up, please does the graph in page 16 include all types of storage or only electrical storage? We are looking at, on this graph and all the numbers that I've shown, I've looked at any form of electrical storage and I have excluded pump hydro. So I don't look at thermal storage here, if that was the question.
Yeah, I think that is the question. And is there a reason that that you haven't included thermal storage?
Yes, because it usually serves a different purpose. I mean, if you're going to store heat, it's not necessarily very often when you store heat is because you have an end use for heat, like your water heater in your home. You're not going to take the heater in the water heater to make electricity again. So really, yes, you're storing energy, but the way I see it, you're consuming electricity and making it something else. It turns out you're making it heat, good for you, but you could make, light out of it. So, we tend not to track heat storage for that specific purpose.
Okay, that makes sense. So we're getting from Greg Billman, who did the presentation before you. Obviously, we did not put Australia on the list.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. All your fault, Lucy. Lucy, I told you to take a list of countries that you thought was the best, and I told you to put Australia. You said Australia suck, and I don't like Greg Billman. Now you deal with the consequences.
Well, yeah, sorry to anyone who's interested in Australia. We don't have, or no, we do have Ireland on that list, actually. I wondered if you could shed any light on Ireland. I know
Yes.
that's an interesting market.
Yes, it's an interesting market. It's unfortunately, I try to focus a little bit here on the markets where I guess are still open for business. Ireland has many features that are interesting for energy storage, a capacity market, a very attractive suite of ancillary services. But however, unfortunately, this market has been, I don't want to say overinvested, but I'm not so sure there's room for new investors to come into this market. Therefore, I haven't put it up, but I do consider it's one of the key markets, if you wish, in Europe, except that it's more something that I'm going to study as maybe an opportunity for I would say vendors of hardware, or a market that I'm going to study as just to see how the regulations are doing, and just to track how the deployments are progressing. Not so much as I would say, you know, a land of opportunity for those that are, bold enough to go all the way there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I'm still intrigued to find out from the audience what these other countries might be.
Maybe
But I think,
maybe it was 16 times Australia. Who knows?
yeah, maybe maybe we'll never find out. But last chance for the audience to let us know in the chat. And I guess I have one final question just regarding. So we've got, we've had events focusing on Latin America, for example, in the past, and we do have a roundtable this afternoon actually, which is focusing in on the future of battery energy storage in Latin America. So I wonder if you had any remarks on that region, any particular countries that you think are strong.
Yeah, so we are at present quite involved ourselves in Chile for various reasons. We're actually going we think this market is so interesting that we are actually investing some of our own resource to create a market report specifically on this country, and which we're going to sell. Well, which we're going to try to sell. Yes, I mean Chile for various reasons, because they have some ancillary services market rules, etc. So simply put, this is a market that we consider is of interest. We have seen also, we have been exposed to opportunities as well in Mexico. So Mexico, the way, well, there's many ways around, there's many things that can be said about Mexico, about the fact that the regulation should change, but seems to be slow at changing. But for sure, there's an easy opportunity in Mexico, which is resides in the way the national operator there, called CFE, bills electricity to its industrial clients. And so it's not very difficult actually to it's actually not very difficult. If you have the data of the if you have the given load data of a site, it's not very difficult to analyze if it makes sense to have a storage asset there to change the shape of your load, and in very often actually it makes sense to do it. So you know, as a first reaction to your question, I would probably certainly look at Chile as a place where utility scale storage is of interest. I would look at Mexico for behind the meter, and yeah, that'll be a good start. That'll be a good start. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, if anyone in the audience is interested in delving a bit deeper into the Latin America market, we do have a couple of seats available at the table. That'll be taking place at 3 p.m. Until 4 p.m. this afternoon. So please do just let us know. And for now, Michael, I think we'll leave it there. And obviously, Michael will be back at 1:30 for his workshop, which is a 2-hour-long workshop.
Yes, yes, my team is going to handle it. I will make maybe I will pop in, but yeah, there's too many of us. Vadim, you want to hear about Eastern Europe? Vadim, Ukraine is the best place.
Yeah.
You know that. You're asking about, you know the answer to the question. The Eastern Europe, well, I don't know where you start Eastern Europe, but just to finish up on that question, yes, indeed, Ukraine for a lot of reasons is an exciting or interesting place for storage, simply because, to cut a very long story short, the context there is they're synchronous with Russia, and for, let's say, various political reasons, they'd rather be synchronous with the rest of Europe through the ancillary Association of System Operators. And that transition is feasible technically, except that the ancillary is telling Ukrenergo, which is a national transmission system operator, yeah, fine, you're welcome, but first you got to prove us that your system is stable. So sure, disconnect from Russia, but you're not welcome. First, we'll test you for, I think it's a year. We'll test your stability, and then if you're stable, you can come in. But if they cut off from Russia, the only way they can be stabilized is through having more inertia, and that's through adding storage. So there's a big discussion there in Ukraine for adding more storage into hundreds of megawatts of storage to the national portfolio, specifically for frequency control. That's one. Now, in terms of Eastern European countries that I can comment on, because I have an experience on them, I would probably say, yeah, Ukraine is the best, and perhaps Hungary, although Hungary is a smaller market and, let's say, not very transparent. But in theory, the prices there again for ancillary services are very, very high. So in principle, if you can penetrate this market, yeah, it's probably very lucrative. Actually, they've been high for a long time, and nobody has penetrated the market. So I don't exactly know what's going on, but yeah, but there's plenty of countries where we have not done any work. So the reason all the countries that have not stated doesn't mean they're not good. They mean that I have no idea, right? Any news from Eastern Europe? Haha. Okay. Okay.
Great. So in the absence of any other questions or comments, I'd just like to give a big thank you to Michael for a very interesting presentation, and we'll see you back just in a little bit over 2 hours for your workshop. And until then, we'll be taking a break where you guys can all enjoy the networking hub.
Bye-bye. See you.
Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye. See you.
Bye.
How does that work? Okay.